Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to the Bay Area restaurant scene with a shot at this absolutely incredible looking tofu pad thai found at Farmhouse Kitchen in Oakland, California. For those unfamiliar, Farmhouse is located on the Jack London Square waterfront, with their original first location also found in the SF Mission District as well. And yes, as you might notice, one of their more popular pad thai dishes does feature lobster tail, which I do not have the budget for, but if anyone here wants to sponsor an episode of lobster pad thai, hit me up. Until then, though, we're gonna take a shot at their slightly more budget-conscious tofu and shrimp pad thai, which, as with anything featuring tofu, poses the challenge of what to do with this bland and tasteless protein known as tofu. Today we're going to navigate this with a cornstarch breading and shallow fry inspired by the one used in our Mongolian beef recipe a while back for truly the crispiest piece of tofu that you will ever create. Then rounding this all out, I've finally gotten my hands on some tamarind paste instead of the premixed Lee Kum Kee stuff that we've been using, which, as many of you know, is by far the most important ingredient in our dish today. So we're going to be pairing that with a few of the usual suspects found in Thai cooking here, like fish sauce and lime juice, as well as a little bit of inspiration from Chinese cooking with a bit of oyster sauce to give our dish a little bit of an extra briny umami. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so diving right in, we're kicking things off here with some familiar aromatics for the fundamental umami qualities of our pad thai today. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger. Then moving right along to the source of heat in our dish today, this is 4 Thai chilies that I'm de-stemming and slicing thinly with the seeds still intact. Now, in a super traditional pad thai, you may often see this element dialed down or even omitted entirely because this dish is not intended to be particularly spicy. I do, however, think that Thai chili is a really iconic flavor to Thai cuisine, but if you can't get your hands on Thai chilies though, I would just omit them entirely rather than try and sub them out because there really is no other chili that tastes like these. Next up, now what we should be using is a single large red shallot peeled and diced. This here is half of a red onion because I forgot to buy shallots. Now, are these two the same thing? Absolutely not. A shallot is going to be a little bit more mild and less sweet than a red onion, but if our choices are a red onion or nothing at all, a diced red onion is absolutely an acceptable substitute. Next up are my 2 medium carrots that I'm removing the root and tips end of and then peeling and slicing into a julienne cut. Then moving on to our garnishes, we're starting by de-stemming some cilantro with a fork here to save quite a bit of time. This is not a perfect shortcut though, so keep in mind that you will have to circle back and remove some errant stems as well. Once separated, we're rolling these tightly into a bunch so that we may slice these leaves up thinly for our garnish. Then finally, last up, I'm slicing up half of a lime into wedges also for our garnish, and we're moving on to our tofu. Okay, so we've talked about this in a few different tofu-based recipes now, but the inherent problem with tofu is that it doesn't taste like anything, which is why it so often fails as a meat substitute. Now, we have also done a couple of fun and creative solutions to impart flavor to firm tofu like this. Our fermented cho tofu recipe comes to mind with all of its flavor coming from its 48-hour fermentation. For today though, instead we're really going to focus on creating a nice crispy piece of tofu so that we can use it to give our final dish a wonderful pop of texture. I'm starting off by pressing out as much water as I can from my tofu here, and then giving it a large dice. Then in a separate bowl, I'm measuring out half a cup of cornstarch and combining it with my tofu to coat. This should look pretty similar to the crisping method that we used in our P.F. Chang's Mongolian beef recipe a few months back as well. Last up, rounding out our proteins, I'm peeling and deveining about 6 shrimp for our wok fry, and then we're moving on to our noodles next. Alright, so as some folks here may remember, we did do a similar tofu pad thai a while back using dried rice stick. Those noodles are pantry stable and a really great solution for folks that don't have easy access to fresh Asian groceries. Today, however, we're going to be making use of these wonderful fresh chow fun noodles courtesy of Hometown Grocery here in Oakland, Chinatown. These noodles are the same thing but made fresh. They're also going to be thinner and more delicate, and if you can get your hands on this stuff, it's going to be well worth the trip to the grocery store. They are, however, very perishable though, so as always, you're going to want to cook this stuff within 24 hours of buying it. I'm separating these noodles into strands so that we don't have to try and do this on heat, and then setting them aside while we dive into our sauce next. Now, I was still measuring this out to taste as I was filming here because, by the way, we can do this now that we have gotten our hands on tamarind paste instead of that pre-mixed junk. But pardon these visual discrepancies. I'm starting off with 4 tablespoons of fish sauce here, followed by 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, a single tablespoon of oyster sauce for some briny umami, and the juice of half of our lime. Then rounding this all out as promised is 2 tablespoons of our tamarind paste, which again is noticeably brighter, more acidic, less sweet, and generally just more punchy than the pre-mixed stuff. Finally, last up, I'm whisking up 3 eggs for our wok fry to round everything out, and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I'm kicking things off here first with the shallow fry on my tofu. I've got my wok heating up as hot as possible, and then I'm adding about half a cup of peanut oil here, and as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then next, I'm adding my tofu a piece at a time so that we may sear these for a full 5 minutes. That cornstarch coating is going to start coming into play here, not only because it's going to prevent things from burning in our wok fry during that sear, but also because it's going to give us some really nice crispy edges while still maintaining a soft and tender piece of tofu on the inside. Ooh. I'm repeating this with my remaining tofu and then setting these aside on a dry rack so that they don't get soggy while we dive into our wok fry next. Back over on the stove, I've cleaned out my wok, then I'm reheating, adding an additional 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and giving 1 more long yao. Then going in first here are my aromatics. This is my garlic, ginger, and Thai chilies going in. I'm blooming these for 15 seconds until fragrant, then following up with, let's just pretend that these are shallots, followed by my julienne carrots. Next, I'm giving these a toss for about 2 minutes, then adding my shrimp and bean sprouts to the wok for a very brief 20-second toss before we immediately follow up with our noodles and sauce. I'm doing this in batches here, about a handful of noodles plus a few tablespoons of sauce at a time, tossing very gently to combine and then repeating until all of my sauce and noodles have been incorporated. This is going to help those noodles incorporate without breaking them into pieces because, once again, they are very delicate. Next, I'm adding in my crispy tofu followed by my egg, which is going around the rim of the wok for 10 seconds to set before we toss things to combine to give our noodles that iconic egg coating. Last up, I'm removing everything from the wok, then reheating to medium heat so that we may dry toast some peanuts. This, by the way, is my best recommendation for learning how to wok toss because peanuts are cheap, consistently shaped, and fairly lightweight so that you can learn how to toss with one hand. Once they're nice and toasted, I'm adding these to a Ziploc bag and then crushing my peanuts with a mallet so that we may use them as a garnish. Then I'm following this up with my cilantro, our lime wedge, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we did do a slightly more pantry-friendly tofu pad thai a while back using the Lee Kum Kee premixed pad thai sauce. Now that we've gotten our hands on some actual tamarind paste though, I gotta say that the differences are absolutely insane. While we did add a decent amount of sugar and fish sauce to give our pad thai that iconically sweet quality, the sweetness has been noticeably dialed back because previously most of the sugar from our dish comes from the premix. To add to that, we were also able to build some more interesting qualities of umami with the addition of elements like oyster sauce, Thai chili, and lime juice, now that the super sweet aspects of that premixed stuff have been moved out of the way. In addition, the tamarind paste itself has a lot more of a bright, acidic, slightly sour and punchy quality to it that really doesn't come through in the premixed stuff because, again, that stuff just has so much sugar in it. Finally, rounding this all out, our tofu is just perfectly crispy on its exterior while also wonderfully tender on its interior, thanks to that cornstarch coating, which really reminds me of the texture that you would get from a Mongolian beef done with the same technique. If you're a fan of this super iconic Thai noodle dish, definitely give this one a shot. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated to reproducing foods from the Bay Area restaurant scene, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Oakland locals, Farmhouse Kitchen is located on the Jack London Square waterfront, so definitely check them out if you haven't yet, because they're amazing. Also, if you are local here in Oakland, the Woo Can Cook Fried Rice Pop-Up is back at Federation Brewing in Oakland every Friday, so come by and say hi then if you can. More about that at woocancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice YouTubers, and I'll see you soon. Bye. We gonna switch.